and today we are continuing our summer reading project with Scythe by Neal Shusterman. And we just got into part 4. The last stream we were able to get into the next part of the series, and the next part of the book. So we are very close. We are we are extremely close to finishing this book. If you can check that out, see my little bookmark there. We are very close to finishing. I did get started a little late today, so I am going to get started on this book as soon as possible. But after we finish the book, we are going to discuss some things, maybe do some activities. And so I do have a couple of things planned for after we finish the book. And hopefully it's interesting and valuable learning experience for you. That's the main goal with these summer reading streams. I hope you are just getting something out of that. If not going out and buying the book yourself to read it, at least enjoying reading it with me and discussing it and learning some new and interesting things. Okay, so I'm going to take a sip of water real quick just because I am a little gravelly today. It's been kind of a busy day. It's been a long day. I'm excited to get started. There's a couple of things that we're going to have to catch up on before I begin reading, just because it has been so long since we've read this book. It was last week that we actually were reading it. So I'm excited to get back into it, but I do want to go over a couple of things that, if you are just joining us, a couple of things that have happened in the book so far that are pretty interesting, dramatic, intense, and obviously spoiler warning for people who haven't gotten this far in the book yet. So if you are coming in to join us now for this summer reading stream, I highly recommend that maybe you go read the other parts of the book, or at least go back to the other videos, maybe give them a watch, just because I'm going to be talking about some spoilers, some stuff that happens in the book and the plot that you need to know previous information in order to be caught up. So Citra and Rowan are our two main characters. They've gone through a lot so far since the start of this book. They were just normal teenagers living their life in the perfect utopia world where nobody dies, until they meet a Scythe for the first time and are asked to join him in an apprenticeship and perhaps become a Scythe themselves. What is a Scythe? A Scythe is a person who in this world gets to choose who lives and who dies, basically. Because there's no death, because nobody dies, they have to have some form of population control. So they choose Scythes for this job. And Citra and Rowan are being trained to become one. Unfortunately, Scythe Faraday, who was their mentor, who's the person who chose them for their apprenticeship, he has supposedly gleaned himself, at least that's what it looks like, and it forced Citra and Rowan to be given to different Scythes to train under. They were not able to escape their apprenticeship, because at the end of this apprenticeship, one of them will be chosen to be a Scythe and the other one will be gleaned by that person who was chosen. So it's really intense. Stakes here, they could die if they lose. Not that either of them want to kill each other. They do happen to like each other, Citra and Rowan. There is some kind of romantic tension happening between them. But now, at the end of part 3, Citra has been accused of killing Scythe Faraday. That was really great timing on that music. And so she's on the run. She has actually escaped the Scythedom custody. She's escaped custody of the High Blade, of the person who's in charge of the Scythes, and she is on the run from them and hoping to find some evidence to clear her name, to show that she did not kill Scythe Faraday, but instead somebody else did, and she wants to find out who that is so she can clear her name. So that's where we're starting today. Citra on the run. She's just tried to So what she does in order to escape, let's just catch caught up here, is she jumps off the building where she's being kept. And of course, she falls to the ground, but she doesn't die. Instead, she becomes what they call dead-ish because she is taken to a revival center to be revived. And while she's being revived, she hears this voice. And the voice is the Thunderhead, which is the AI of this world that controls everything. It started talking to her and telling her information about her future and what her role is in that future. And the Scythe, the Thunderhead wants to help her. It wants to help her become what she needs to be in order for change in the world to happen, because there are some corrupt Scythes that are taking their job beyond the limits of what the Scythedom really, really wants. And so there's lots of problems, conflict, things going on. It's really intense, and we're getting so close to the end of this book. So let's jump into it. We're on chapter 31. And a streak of unrelenting foolishness. Citra was pronounced alive at 9:42 a.m. Thursday morning, right on schedule, and passed from the jurisdiction of the Thunderhead to the jurisdiction of the Scythedom. She woke up feeling much weaker and out of sorts than the first time she had died. She felt heavily drugged and bleary-eyed. Above her stood a nurse, grimly shaking her head. "She should not be woken this soon," the nurse said, with an accent Citra was too tired to place. "She must have at least 6 hours after the pronouncement until she has recovered enough to be comfortably conscious. The girl could burst a blood vessel or blow out her heart, and I have to revive her all over again." "I will take responsibility," Citra heard Scythe Curie say. Citra turned her head towards Scythe Curie's voice, and the world spun. She closed her eyes, waiting for the room to stop revolving. When the dizziness settled, she opened her eyes once more and saw that Scythe Curie had pulled her chair closer. "Your body still needs another day to heal completely, but we don't have time for that." Scythe Curie turned to the nurse. "Please leave us now." The nurse grumbled in Spanish and stormed out of the room. "The High Blade," mumbled Citra, her words slurring. "He accused me of... "Shh," said Scythe Curie. "I know of the accusation. Xenocrates tried to keep it from me, but Scythe Mandela told me everything." As Citra's eyes came clearer into focus, she saw the window behind Scythe Curie. There were mountains in the distance, covered with snow, and there were flurries falling just outside. It gave Citra a moment of pause. "How long have I been dead?" she asked. Could it be her splat was so severe that it took months to revive her? "Not quite 4 days." Then Scythe Curie turned around to see what Citra was looking at. She turned back with a grin. "The question is not of time, but of place. You are in the southernmost tip of the Chile-Argentine region. It is still late September, but here that means spring has just started. However, this far south, I suppose spring comes late." Okay, so just going back real quick, because there's a couple of things that I like about this book, specifically the futuristic way that the author describes the region and gives names to the region, because it seems like this world is close to our own in some respect, at least as far as like time goes, because they haven't fully changed the names of all of the countries. Instead, they are not in Chile or Argentina, but Chile, Argentina, Argentine region, meaning that those two countries either were brought together or were just designated to be to be together in a part of the same region. We're not sure. There's not a lot that's given to us about the environment in this book, so we really don't know what the world looks like, or even like a map of the world. There's no map of this future world in the book, at least in this part of the series. There are 2 other books in the series, so it could go into more detail, but I get the feeling that you're just supposed to kind of vaguely recognize some of the country names, so that way you know pretty much where on Earth they are at a certain point. Citra tried to picture a map and get a sense of how far from home she was, but just trying to imagine it made her head spin again. The Thunderhead saw it fit to take you as far from the clutches of Scythe Xenocrates and the corruption of the mid-American Scythedom as possible, but the moment you revived, they were notified of your location, as is the law. How did you know where to find me? A friend of a friend of a friend is a Nimbus agent. Word got to me only yesterday, and I came as quickly as I could. Thank you, said Citra. Thank you for coming. Thank me once you're safe. Now that you've been revived and Xenocrates knows where you are, you can bet he's notified the local Scythes. I'm certain a team has dispatched to retrieve you, which means we need to get you out of here now. With a shattered body that was still healing and nanites pumping an endless stream of opiates into her system, Citra could barely move, much less walk. Her bones ached. Her brain felt like it was floating in a jar. Her muscles were knotted, and trying to put weight on her feet was excruciating because there was simply too much pain to tamp down. No wonder the nurse had wanted her to remain unconscious. This won't do, said Scythe Curie, and took Citra up into her arms, carrying her. The Revival Center The Revival Center hallways seemed endless, and each time Citra was jostled, her whole body throbbed. Finally, she found herself spread out on the back seat of an off-grid car that Scythe Curie drove at what seemed to Citra to be a breakneck speed. The thought made her laugh weakly. What an odd expression, when the breaking of her neck had seemed to happen in slow motion. Flurries blowing past the windows appeared to be a blizzard at this speed. It was hypnotic. At last, numbness began to overtake her, and she felt sleep begin to envelop her like quicksand. And we're gonna change the music here, because now she is on the run. So let's see. On the run. Let's try this one. Perfect. Okay. But the moment before Citra lost consciousness, she remembered just a hint of a dream that may have not been a dream at all. A conversation in a place that was neither life nor death, but a womb between the two. The Thunderhead, it spoke to me, Citra said, forcing herself to stay conscious just long enough to get this out. The Thunderhead doesn't speak to Scythes, dear. I was still dead, and it told me a name. The man who killed Scythe Faraday. But the quicksand pulled her down before she could say any more. Citra awoke in a cabin, and for a moment thought she might have hallucinated all of it. The Thunderhead, the Revival Center, the car ride in the snow. But that moment she thought she was still in the rooftop residence of Highblade Xenocrates, waiting for the torture to begin. But no, the light here was different, and the wood in the cabin around her was a lighter shade. Outside the window, she could see snowy mountains, closer than they were before, although the flurries had stopped. Scythe Curie came in a few minutes later with a tray and a bowl of soup. Good, you're awake. I trust you've healed enough over the past few hours to be a little bit more coherent and a little less miserable. Coherent, yes, said Citra. Less miserable? No, just a different kind of misery. Citra sat up, feeling only a little loopy now, and Scythe Curie put the tray with large bowl of soup in her lap. It's a chicken soup recipe passed down for more generations than anyone remembers, she told Citra. The soup looked fairly standard, but there was a round moon-like mass in the middle. What's that? The best part, said Scythe Curie. A sort of dumpling made from the ground crumbs of unleavened bread. Citra tried the soup. It was flavorful, and the moon ball unique and memorable. Comfort food, thought Citra, because somehow it made her feel safe from the inside out. My grandmother said it could actually heal a cold. What's a cold? Asked Citra. A deadly illness from the mortal age, I suppose. It was amazing to think that someone only 2 generations older than Scythe Curie could have known what it was like to be mortal, fearing for her life on a daily basis, knowing that death was a certainty rather than an exception. Citra wondered what Scythe Curie's grandmother would think of the world now, where there was nothing left for her soup to cure. When the soup was done, Citra steeled herself for what she knew she must tell the Scythe. "There's something you need to know," Citra said. "Xenocrates showed me something he said Scythe Faraday wrote. It was his handwriting, but I don't know how he could have written it." Scythe Curie sighed. "Oh, I'm afraid he did." Citra was not expecting that. "So, you've seen it then?" Scythe Curie nodded. "Yes, I have." "But why would he write that? He said I wanted to kill him, that I was plotting horrible things. None of that is true." Scythe Curie offered Citra the slightest of grins. "He wasn't talking about you, Citra," she explained. "He wrote that about me." What? And now we're actually in a cabin, so we need to change the music back. Let's go turn this off. There's some good music though for like the running dramatic part. Okay, so the letter that Scythe Faraday wrote was not about Citra, but instead about Scythe Curie. I wonder how that worked. We're gonna get some information here about these two. I think it's obvious at this point that Scythe Curie and Scythe Faraday were on the same side, right? If we're gonna say that the Scythedom is split into two types of sides, the old guard and the new guard, which is what the previous part talked about, was really focused on. And we can guess that Scythe Curie and Scythe Faraday are on the same side, but it seems they also have another kind of shared history. And maybe Scythe Curie is gonna spill the tea to Citra about what that history is. "When Faraday was still a junior Scythe, all of 22 years old, he took me on as an apprentice," said Scythe Curie. "I was 17 and full of righteous indignation at a world that was just heaving in the throes of transformation. Immortality had been a reality for barely 50 years. There was still discord and political posturing, even fear of the Thunderhead, if you could imagine that." Fear of it? Who could possibly be afraid of the Thunderhead? People who had the most to lose, criminals, politicians, organizations that thrived on the oppression of others. The point was, the world was still changing, and I wanted to help it change faster. Both Scythe Faraday and I were of similar minds about that, which I suppose is why he took me on. We were both driven by a desire to use gleaning as a way of hacking through the thicket to open a better path for humanity. Okay, so really quick, Scythe Curie talks about who, Citra's asked, like, who would be afraid of the Thunderhead? Don't forget, we have movies in today's world where robots become sentient and take over the world. Terminator. There's so many others that I can't think of at this very moment in time, but there is a concept. It's a trope, you could say. So for Citra to be kind of shocked that people would be scared of the AI is not come as a shock to us. And Scythe Curie is right. The people who would be fearful of it are the people who have the most to lose, like criminals and people who the Thunderhead would take care of if it was given power. But there's the other part of it where people would probably be scared it would kill everybody, kill humankind. Like, that's totally a possibility. But the Thunderhead isn't like that. The Thunderhead is not trying to involve itself in the killing of humankind, probably because of the Terminator. I like to believe that in this world, the Terminator exists as a piece of art from the post-mortal age. They call it post-mortal, pre-mortal. Anyway, I like to think that it exists and that the Thunderhead has watched it and knows that it doesn't want to do that. It can't do that. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. That's my speculation, my fan fiction. Okay. Back to Scythe Curie. "Oh, you should have seen him in those days, Citra. You've only seen him old. He likes to remain that way to keep himself from being too tempted by a younger man's passions." Scythe Curie smiled as she spoke about her former mentor. "I remember I would wait outside his door at night listening to him as he slept. I was 17, remember? Childish in so many ways. I thought myself in love." "Wait, you were in love with him?" Scythe Curie and Scythe Faraday. So cute. I love it. I love it. This can go back up here. There we go. No, too high? Perfect, right there. Infatuated. He was a rising star who took a wide-eyed girl under his wing. Even though in those days he only gleaned the wicked, he did it with such compassion. He melted my heart each time. Then she sobered a bit, looking a bit sheepish, which was a strange expression for steely Scythe Curie. I actually worked up the nerve to go into his room one night, determined to climb into his bed and be with him. Oh my. But he caught me halfway across his bedroom floor. Oh, I made up some silly excuse as to why I was there. I was coming in to retrieve his empty glass or something like that. He didn't believe me for an instant. He knew I was up to something, and I couldn't look him in the eye. I thought he knew. I thought he was wise and could see into my soul, but at 22, he was just as inexperienced in such matters as I was. He had no clue what was really going on. Then Citra understood. He thought you wanted to hurt him. I think all young women are cursed with a streak of unrelenting foolishness. The title of the chapter. And all young men are cursed with a streak of absolute stupidity. He didn't see my obsession with him as love, but thought I meant him bodily harm. It was, to say the least, a very painful comedy of errors. I suppose I can understand my advances would be misunderstood in that way. I do admit that I was an odd girl, intense to the point of being off-putting. I think you've grown into your intensity, Citra said. That I have. In any case, he wrote of his paranoid concerns about me in his Scythe's journal, then tore it out the next day when I broke down and confessed my love with eyeball-rolling melodrama. She sighed and shook her head. I was hopeless. He, on the other hand, was a gentleman. He told me that he was flattered, which is the last thing any teenage girl wants to hear, and let me down as easily as he could. I lived in his house and remained his apprentice for 2 more awkward months. Then I was ordained and became Honorable Scythe Marie Curie. We parted ways. We would nod and say hello to each other at conclave. Then, nearly 50 years later, when we both had turned our first corner and we were seeing the world through youthful eyes once more, but this time with the wisdom of age on our side, we became lovers. What? 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 That's okay. Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, here's the thing. If it's, if it's right, then it's right. It's still kind of weird. I feel like age is such a weird thing in this universe. I feel like there's still a pretty big stigma about youth. Like being young, like a really young, right? Like looking like a teenager even. When you reset your age, you can't go back to being a teenager. You can only go back to being like 20. Okay, how much older is he than her? He's only 5 years older than her, so that's okay. Then that's okay. They're old enough to be together. That's fine. But yeah, okay. Scythe Curie, Scythe Faraday, in love. Aww, so sweet. Oh, she must have been really sad when he self-gleaned. Oh. Okay, so we became lovers. Citra is about to bring up a very important point that if you aren't remembering, you may have forgotten. Citra grinned. You broke the 9th commandment? We told ourselves we didn't. So the 9th commandment says that they can not have any spouse or any children. Scythes must not be engaged. They can't marry. They can't have kids. It's an only solitary job. They have to live alone. They don't have to live alone, but they have to be alone. They can't get married. So it's kind of a stipulation that they broke, which may mean why they're not together now. We told ourselves we didn't. We told ourselves we were never partners, just companions of convenience. Two like-minded people who shared a lifestyle that others simply couldn't understand. The lifestyle of a scythe. Still, we knew enough to keep it secret. That was when he first showed me the page he had written and torn out in his youth. He had held on to that ridiculous journal entry like a poorly penned love letter never sent. He kept our relationship a secret for 7 years. Then Prometheus found out about it. The first world supreme blade? Oh, it wasn't just a regional scandal. It was a worldwide implications. We were brought before the global conclave. We thought we might be the first Scythes to actually be stripped of our rings and hurled out of the Scythedom, perhaps even gleaned. But we had such stellar reputations. Supreme Blade Prometheus saw fit to give us a less severe punishment. We were sentenced to 7 deaths, 1 for each year of our relationship. Then he forbade us to have contact with each other for the next 70 years.
Aww.
That's sad, right? That's kind of sad. Because, they seem to really like each other. And they couldn't even talk to each other. They had to literally break up. No backsliding for 70 years. Okay, where was I? I'm sorry, said Citra. Don't be. We deserved it, and we understood. We needed to be made an example for other Scythes who now think twice before allowing love to interfere with their duty. 7 deaths and 70 years later, many things had changed. We remained old friends, but after that, nothing more. Scythe Curie seemed a mix of many emotions, but she folded them all away, like clothes that no longer fit, and closed the drawer. Citra suspected she never spoke of this to anyone else and would probably never speak of it again. I should have known he'd never throw that page away, Scythe Curie said. They must have found it when they cleaned out his things. And Xenocrates thought he was writing about me? Scythe Curie considered that. Let's let her consider. Scythe Curie considered that. Perhaps, but probably not. Xenocrates is not a stupid man. He may have suspected the true nature of that page. But truth didn't matter. He saw a means to an end, a way to discredit you in front of respectable Scythes like Scythe Mandela, who heads the bejeweling committee, and thereby ensure that Scythe Goddard's apprentice would get the ring instead of you. We're just gonna take a break on the music for a minute because we're getting into some intense knowledge. Citra wanted to be angry at Rowan for this, but she knew whatever else was going on in that head of his, this was not his doing. Why would Xenocrates even care? He's not one of Goddard's miserable crew of Scythes. He doesn't even seem to like Goddard, and clearly couldn't care less about me and Rowan. There are more cards in play than can be read at the moment, Scythe Curie said. All we know for sure is that you must stay out of sight until we can clear you of even suggestion of wrongdoing. Just then, someone came to the door, startling Citra. She hadn't known anyone else was in the cabin. It was another Scythe by the look of her. Probably the one who owned the cabin. She was shorter than Scythe Curie. Her robe had an intricate pattern in many colors, red, black, and turquoise. It seemed less of a fabric and more of a tapestry, intricately woven. Citra wondered if all Chil-Argentine Scythes wore robes that seemed not just handmade, but lovingly made. The woman spoke in Spanish, and Scythe Curie responded in kind. I didn't know you spoke Spanish, said Citra, after Chil-Argentine Scythe had left. I speak 12 languages fluently, said Scythe Curie, a bit of pride in her voice. 12? Scythe Curie offered up a mischievous grin. See if you don't know as many languages when you've lived as long as I have. She took the tray from Citra's lap and set it on a nightstand. I thought we'd have more time, but the local Scythe authority's on their way. I doubt they know you're here, but they're sending scouts to every Scythe's home with DNA sweepers, figuring we must have some local help. So, we're on the move again. Citra swung her feet off the bed and planted them on the ground. Her ankles ached, but only slightly. It was a good kind of ache. I can walk myself this time. Good, because you'll be doing a lot of that. Scythe Curie glanced out of the window. No one was coming yet, but there was a tension in her voice that wasn't there before. I'm afraid I won't be coming with you, Citra. If I am to clear your name, I need to go back home and rally as many scythes as I can. But the local charlatan, it looks like such a strange word. Chalargentine Scythedom. What can they do to me? I'm breaking no commandment. All they can do is wag the naughty finger at me and refuse to wave goodbye as I drive to the airport. So when you get home, you'll have to tell everyone the truth about the journal entry? I don't see what other choice I have. Of course, Xenocrates will claim that I'm lying to protect you, but most will take my word over his. Hopefully that will embarrass him enough to withdraw the claim. So where can I go? Asked Citra. I have an idea about that. Then Scythe Curie reached into a drawer and pulled out the rough-woven burlap frock of a tonus. You want me to pretend to be part of a tone cult? A lone pilgrim. They're very common in this part of the world. You'll be nameless, faceless wanderer. It wasn't the most glamorous of disguises, but Citra knew it was practical. No one would look her in the eye for fear of getting an earful of tonus twaddle. She would hide in plain sight and come home just before winter conclave. If Scythe Curie hadn't cleared her name by then, it wouldn't matter anyway. She wasn't about to spend her whole life in hiding. Then the there it is again. The Chalargentine Scythe burst in again, this time much more agitated than before. They're here, Scythe Curie said. Oh, okay, let's cue the music, everybody. Here we go. Too loud, probably. There we go. Okay, where am I at? They're here, Scythe Curie said. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, pressing it into Citra's palm. There's somewhere I want you to go, somewhere you need to see. The address is on that paper. Consider it the final part of your training. Citra grabbed the frock, and while Scythe Curie hurried Citra out of the room and to the back door, the Chalargentinian Scythe went to the weapons wardrobe and quickly filled a sack with concealable blades and firearms for Citra. Just dumping weapons into a sack? Like, can she use all of those? Can she carry all of those? I mean, never mind. Of course she can use all of them, but can she carry all of them? Just putting them into a burlap sack? Was she gonna hike with a bag full of weapons as a tonist? I don't know. I feel like you need to conceal them better. My personal thought. Okay. Okay, so she went to the weapons wardrobe and quickly filled a sack with concealable blades and firearms for Citra, the way a worried mother might fill her child's bag with snacks. That deserves this. Okay. There's a public car in a shed at the bottom of the hill. Take it and head south, Scythe Curie said. Citra opened the back door and stepped out. It was cold, but bearable. Listen to me carefully, said Scythe Curie. It's a long trip, and you're going to need your wits about you to get where you're going. Then Scythe Curie went on to give Citra the instructions she needed to make the journey of many thousands of miles, but she was cut short by the sound of a car pulling up in the front of the house. Go! As long as you keep moving, you'll be safe. And what do I do when I get there? Scythe Curie met her eye with a hard gaze that revealed nothing but added importance to her words. A tonist might call it resonance. When you get there, you'll know what to do. Then there came that all too familiar pounding on the front door. Citra bounded down like the snowy hillside, careening off pines in her way, the aches in her joints reminding her that she was still a few hours shy of a complete healing. She found the shed, and the public car was there just as Scythe Curie had promised. It powered up for her as she got in, and it asked for a destination. Something to think about. Something to keep in mind. They have self-driving cars in this world. They have self-driving cars. So driving a car is like a luxury. So the fact that Scythe Curie drives a car, that's why it's so strange, because they have self-driving cars. A public car. A car is a car that's like an AI that's like, oh, hey, you need to go somewhere, when you get in. Okay, so it powered up and asked for a destination. She wasn't foolish enough to give it one. North, she told it. Just north. As she sped off, she heard an explosion and then another. She looked back, but all she could see was black smoke just beginning to rise above the treetops. Dread began to fill her. A man wearing a robe similar to the one Scythe Curie's friend wore burst from the trees and into the road behind her. She saw him only for an instant. Then the road took a sharp turn and he was gone from sight. Only after the public car had wound its way down the mountain pass and was on a main road did she look at the paper that Scythe Curie had given her. For a moment, it felt as if her bones had spontaneously shattered, but the feeling passed and settled into jaded resolve. She understood now. When you get there, you'll know what to do. Yes, she most certainly would. She stared at the piece of paper for a moment. She needed only to memorize the address because she already knew the name. Gerald van der Gans. So Gerald van der Gans is the name the Thunderhead gave her when she was in a cult, when she was being revived. And that's the person who killed Scythe Faraday. The Thunderhead had spoken to her, and now so had Scythe Curie. There was a long journey ahead of Citra, and at the end of it, much work to be done. Citra couldn't glean, but she could exact vengeance. She would find a way to deliver justice to this Scythe killer one way or another. Never was she so thankful to have a sack full of weapons. This was a matter too delicate to be left to the Blade Guard, and although Scythe San Martin detested being used as a mere enforcement agent, he also knew that catching this mid-American girl would be a feather in his cap. He knew the girl was there even before he knocked on the door. His associate, an over-enthusiastic junior Scythe named Bello, had already turned on the DNA scanner and picked up traces the moment they stepped out of the car. Okay, so we've just hit a little break in the page, and we've switched points of view again. So we've gone from Citra's point of view with third person limited to another third person limited, but this time it's the Scythe that was chasing her. San Martin drew his weapon as he approached the cabin, a pistol he had had since the day he was ordained, given to him by his mentor. It was his weapon of choice for all gleanings, an extension of who he was. And although he didn't expect there to be anyone to glean today, it made him feel whole to have it drawn. Weird. Besides, gleaning aside, it might be necessary. I skipped a page, excuse me. It might be necessary to incapacitate someone, although he had been warned not to render anyone, especially the girl, deadish, because that had created the very fiasco he was now attempting to resolve. He pounded on the door and pounded again. He was ready to kick it in when none other than Scythe Marie Curie herself came to the door. San Martin tried not to be starstruck. The Marquesa de la Muerte was well known throughout the world for her early achievements, a living legend everywhere, not just in the north. "There's a doorbell, or didn't you notice?" she said in Spanish so perfect it threw Scythe San Martin off his game. Are you here for lunch?" He stammered for a moment, deepening his disadvantage, then recovered as best he could. "We're here for the girl," he said. "No sense denying she's here, we already know." And he gestured toward Bello, whose DNA detector was pinging in the red. She glanced at San Martin's raised pistol and humphed with such authority he found himself lowering it almost involuntarily. "She was here," Scythe Curie said, "but not anymore. She's on her way to an Antarctic resort for some skiing. You might catch her flight if you hurry, though." The chill Argentine Scythedom was not known for its sense of humor, and Scythe San Martin was no exception. He would not be made a fool of, even by one of the greats. He pushed his way past her into the cabin, where the chill Argentinian Scythe, whose name he couldn't remember, stood as defiantly as Scythe Curie. "Search all you want," said the second Scythe, "but if you break anything..." She never got to finish the thought, because Bello, overzealous as ever, jabbed her with a jolt baton that left her unconscious. "Was that really necessary?" chided Scythe Curie. "It's me you have a gripe with, not poor Eva." On a hunch, San Martin went out the back door and sure enough found telltale footprints in the snow. "She's on foot," he told Bello. Apuerte, I think. I don't know. I have to practice my Spanish. Apuerte. She can't have gotten far. Scythe Bello launched into pursuit like a bloodhound, heading down the snowy hillside, disappearing into the trees. San Martin went back inside, hurrying to the front door. The road wound down the hill. If Bello couldn't catch her on foot, perhaps San Martin could head her off in the car. Scythe Curie, however, stood in the doorway, barring his way. He raised his weapon again, and in response, she pulled out her own, a handgun with a stubby muzzle wide enough to fit a golf ball in the barrel. A mortar pistol. He might as well have had a pea shooter against that thing, but he didn't lower his weapon, no matter how outclassed it was. I have special permission from our High Blade to fire on you if necessary, he warned her. And I have no permission from anyone, said Scythe Curie, but I am more than happy to do the same. They held their standoff for more heartbeats than felt advisable. Then Scythe Curie turned her gun aside and fired out the front door. An explosion blew in the front windows of the cabin, the shockwave knocking San Martin to the ground, and yet Scythe Curie still stood in the doorway, barely flinched. San Martin scrambled to the door to see what the blast from the mortar pistol had turned his car into a bonfire. Sucks. Then she fired again, this time blowing up her own car. Well now, she said, I suppose you'll have to stay for lunch. He looked at the two flaming vehicles and sighed, knowing he'd be a laughingstock for his failure today. He looked at Scythe Curie, her steely gray eyes, her calm control of the situation, and he realized he never really stood a chance against the Marquesa de la Muerte. There wasn't much he could do but glare at her in heartfelt disapproval. Very bad, he said, whacking a finger. Very bad. Okay, fun. Love Scythe Curie, right? Totally want her on my team if I ever have to make a daring escape. So interesting that they have other languages in this world. I mean, of course they would. It does actually make a lot of sense for there to be multiple languages still, because it is still pretty close to our day and age. But I feel like perhaps, you know, in a world where there's kind of like this universal understanding, like this AI that controls everything, maybe there wouldn't be as many languages left. I feel like there might be only a couple of like main languages that people use because there would be so much connectivity with people. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Okay, we're moving right along into the next chapter. We've got a new journal entry from Scythe Curie. Yet even in dreams, I often find myself gleaning. I have one dream that recurs far too often. I'm walking on an unfamiliar street that I feel I should know, but I don't. I have a pitchfork, which I've never used in real life. Its awkward tines are not well suited for gleaning, and when it strikes, it reverberates, giving off a sound that is something between ringing and moaning, like the numbing vibration of a tonist's bident. There is a woman before me whom I must glean. I jab at her, yet the pitchfork fails to do the job. Her wounds heal instantly. She is not upset or frightened, nor is she amused. She is simply resigned to stand there, allowing me to futilely attempt to end her life. She opens her mouth to speak, but her voice is soft, and her words are drowned out by the fork's ghastly moans, so I never hear her, and I always wake up screaming. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Chapter 32. Troubled Pilgrimage. All public cars are on the grid, but scythes can't track their movements until their navigational data is dropped into the backbrain. That happens every 60 minutes, so that's how often you'll have to change cars. So that part that I just read is in italics, which means that that's some information that Citra is remembering from Scythe Curie about how she needs to escape and what she needs to do so that she is, not going to get caught. Okay, let's try this. Take this down to here. Take this up to here. Okay. So italics, if you don't know, if you don't read books, italics is when the lines or the letters are a little bit slanted, right? So it looks different than the rest of the words on the page that we're reading. So that's how you know that it is something that the character's remembering or thinking internally, or that somebody else told them and they're, kind of hearing those words again. Scythe Curie's instructions had come at Citra quickly. She only hoped she could remember them all. She could do this. Her apprenticeship had taught her to be self-sufficient and resourceful. She ditched the first public car in a small town right on time. She was worried that there might not be as many vacant public cars in the Charlton. I'm gonna get it right. I've gotten it right a couple of times, but now it's sneaking up on me. She was worried that there might not be as many vacant public cars in the Chillargentine region, especially in this remote area. But the Thunderhead was remarkable at projecting local need. In all things, there always seemed to be a supply to fit the demand. She had already changed into the coarse tonus frock and had pulled its hood over her head. It was remarkable how people avoided her. Vehicle changes every hour meant that her pursuers were always right behind her. She realized she had to cut a weaving course, like cargo ships in mortal age wartime, to throw them off her path and keep them from anticipating where she'd be next. For over a day, she could never sleep for more than an hour at a time, and several instances when there was only road and no civilization for long stretches. She had to be crafty, ditching the car before arriving in town, where Chillargentine size and officers of the local Blade Guard were already waiting for her. She actually walked right past one Scythe, certain she'd be caught, but she was smart enough to cross downwind of his DNA detector. The fact that the Scythes themselves were supervising the hunt and not just leaving it to the Blade Guard meant Sintra felt all the more terrified, yet oddly important too. Interesting, talking about these DNA scanners, I wonder how that works, I wonder how you have basically this scanner that's reading the air for your DNA. That's kind of scary, right? That's kind of scary. If you did a crime, or if you're in such a situation where you're running from essentially the police, they can find you with a DNA scanner, and she gets away with it from being downwind of the scanner, but I still feel like DNA scanner would still pick up your DNA at some point. I don't know. So that's kind of weird, Okay, just something I think about when I read this the second time through. Okay, this part is in italics as well. Once you reach Buenos Aires, take a hypertrain north across Amazonia to the city of Caracas. As soon as you cross the border into Amazonia, you'll be safe. They won't lift a finger to help Xenocrates or detain you. Citra knew the reason for this from her historical studies. Too many Scythes from other regions glean out of their jurisdiction while on vacation in Amazonia. There's no law against it, but it has made the Amazonian Scythedom uncooperative and openly obstructionist when it comes to assisting Scythes from any other region. The problem was the train in Buenos Aires. They'd be waiting for her in force at every train station and airport. She was saved by a group of Tonists heading to Isthmus. "We seek the great fork in the umbilical between north and south," they told her, thinking she was one of them. "There are rumors it is hidden in an ancient engineering work. We believe it could be sealed with one of the gates of the Panama. It could be sealed within one of the gates of the Panama Canal." It took her all her will not to laugh. "Will you join us, sister?" And so she did, just long enough to board the train north, right under the noses of more watchful eyes than she could count, holding her breath, not out of fear, but so she wouldn't trip any DNA detectors in the station. There were 7 Tonists in the group. Apparently, his branch of the cult only traveled in groups of 7 or 12, as per musical mathematics, but they were willing to break the rule and add her to their number. Their accent suggested they weren't from American continents, but somewhere in Euroscandia. "Where have your journeys taken you?" one of them asked, a man who seemed the leader. He smiled whenever he spoke, which made him all the more off-putting. "Here and there," she told him. "What is your quest?" "My quest? Don't all wandering pilgrims have quests?" "Yes," she said, "I seek an answer to the burning question. Is it A flat or G sharp?" And one of the others said, "Don't even get me started." There were no windows, for there was no scenery to see in the subsurface vacuum tube. Citra had traveled by air and on standard maglev trains, but the narrow, claustrophobic nature of a hypertrain made her uneasy. The Tonists, who must have been used to all sorts of travel, weren't bothered. They discussed legends, debating which were true and which were false, and which were somewhere in between. We've been from the pyramids to Israbia to the Great Wall of Pan-Asia in search of clues to the Great Fork's whereabouts, their leader said. It's the pilgrimage that matters. I doubt any of us would know what to do if we actually found it. Once the train reached a cruising speed of 800 miles per hour, Citra excused herself to the restroom, where she splashed water in her face, trying not to let the exhaustion overtake her. She had forgotten to lock the door. Uh-oh. She had forgotten to lock the door. Had she done that, her journey might have played out much differently. A man burst in on her. Her initial thought was just that he didn't know someone was there. But before she could turn, before she could do much of anything, he had a gold-edged blade at her throat, positioned to do the most damage. You have been selected for gleaning, he said, speaking in common, but with a pronounced accent that must have been Portuzonian, which was the primary language of Amazonia. His robe was a deep forest green, and she remembered reading somewhere that Scythes of that region all wore the same green robe. You're making a mistake, Citra said, before he could slice open her neck. Tell me my mistake. Then tell me my mistake, he said, but be quick about it. She tried to come up with something that would say his hand other than the truth, but she realized there was nothing else. I'm a Scythe's apprentice. If you tried to glean me, I would just be revived, and you would be disciplined for not checking your ring first to see if I had immunity. He smiled. It is as I thought. You're the one they're all looking for. He took the blade away from her neck. Listen to me. Carefully. There are chill Argentine Scythes aboard this train disguised as regular passengers. You can't avoid them. But if you wish to remain out of their clutches, I suggest you come with me. Citra's instinct was to tell him no, and that she'd be fine on her own. But her judgment pulled rank on instinct, and she went with him. He led her to the next car, where, even though the train was crowded, there was an empty seat beside him. He introduced himself as Scythe Suelo of Amazonia. What now? Citra asked. We wait. Citra pulled her hood over her head, and sure enough, a few minutes later, a man made his way forward from the very back car, dressed like any other traveler, but moving slowly and consulting an object in his palm that looked like a phone, but was not. Don't flee, whispered Scythe Posuelo to Citra. Give him no control of the situation. The device began to click like a Geiger counter as the man reached them, and he stopped, his query found. Citra Terra Nova, he said. Citra calmly removed her hood. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't let that show. Congratulations, she said. You found me. Gold star for you. He was thrown off by her expression, but that didn't stop him. I'm taking you into custody. He pulled out a jolt baton. Don't try to resist. It will only make it worse for you. Now Scythe Posuelo turned to him. On whose authority do you do this? On the joint authority of Lautaro Highblade of the Chilantine region and Highblade Xenocrates of Mid-America, neither of which have any jurisdiction here. He chuckled. Excuse me, but no. Excuse me, said Posuelo, with just a right level of indignation. We crossed into Amazonia at least 5 minutes ago. If you attempt to press your advantage in any way, she has every right to defend herself with lethal-ish force, even against a scythe. Citra took that as a cue to pull out a hunting knife she was concealing in her frock, and she stood to face him. Make one move with that baton, and they'll have to reattach your hand. Behind him, a porter came into the train car to see what the commotion was. Sir, said Citra, this man is a chill Argentine Scythe, but he isn't wearing his ring or robe. Isn't that against the law in Amazonia? Never had Citra been so happy to have studied her Scythe history. Congrats, Citra. That was amazing. That was amazing, being able to have that on cue in your brain. Great job. Great job, Citra. The porter looked the man over, and his eyes narrowed to a suspicious glare, suspicious enough for Citra to know whether his allegiance lie. Furthermore, all foreign Scythes must register before crossing our border, he said, even when Chill Argentine Scythe's temper quickly began to boil. Leave me to my business, or I will glean you where you stand. No, you won't, said Scythe Posuelo, with such matter-of-fact calm it made Citra grin. I've granted him immunity. You can't glean him. What? Then the Amazonian Scythe reached his hand right up to the porter's face, who grabbed it and kissed his ring. Thank you, Your Honor. This man threatened violence against me, Citra told the porter. I demand he be put off the train at the next stop, along with any other disguised scythes he's traveling with. It would be my pleasure, said the porter. You can't do that, the Scythe insisted, but a few minutes later, he found out otherwise. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I love that the Amazonian scythes, like, hate the rest of the world scythes, and are just like, no, whenever you come here, you're gonna deal with us, and we're gonna mess your stuff up, which I just think is so great. Also, Amazonia has got to be like a rainforest, right? It's got to be the Amazon rainforest. I really hope it still exists in this world. I hope Neal Shusterman was kind enough to his utopia that the Amazon rainforest got to stick around. Okay, with her pursuers kicked off the train. Okay, so now we're down. We've stopped the intense fugitive songs for now, but now. We're chilling, right? Citra's like, okay, I'm on this train. I'm chilling. I'm enjoying my life a little bit. At least a reprieve from being chased down by a bunch of scythes who want to kill me or take me to prison. Okay. With her pursuers kicked off the train, Citra enjoyed a respite from the relentless cat-mouse game. Her cover blown, she pulled on street clothes that fit her from someone's luggage. Nice going, Citra. That's called stealing. Jeans and a flowery blouse that wasn't her style, but the clothes were adequate. The tonists were disappointed, yet didn't seem all that surprised that she wasn't actually one of them. They left her with a pamphlet she promised she'd read, but suspected she wouldn't. Whatever your destination, Scythe Posuelo told her, you'll have to change trains at Amazonia's Central Station. I suggest you meander through several different outbound trains before boarding the one you're actually taking, so that the DNA detectors will send those chasing you in every which way. Of course, the more she wandered the station, the more likely she'd be seen, but it was worth the risk to confuse the DNA detectors and send her pursuers on a wild goose chase. I don't know why they're after you, Scythe Posuelo said as the train pulled into the station, but if your issues resolve and you do get your ring, you should come back to Amazonia. The rainforest stretches across the whole continent as it did in its most ancient days, and we live in its canopy. You would find it marvelous. So they do have a rainforest. Yay! The rainforest still exists. And they live in the canopy, so they like live in the forest, in the rainforest. That's pretty cool. I wonder if they're like more survivalist over there, you know, because like, you know, if they've preserved the rainforest, did they preserve all of the species, the animals and stuff in the rainforest? That's interesting. I thought you didn't like foreign scythes, she told him with a smirk. There's a difference between those we invite and those who intrude, he told her. Citra did her best to leave DNA traces on half a dozen trains before slipping onto one bound for Caracas, on the North Amazonian coast. If there were agents out there looking for her, she didn't spot them, but she wouldn't be so cavalier as to think she was out of harm's way. From the city of Caracas, Scythe Curie had instructed her to follow the northern coastline east until coming to a town called Playa Pintada. She would have to avoid public cars or any other mode of transportation that would pinpoint her location. But she found the closer she got, the more her resolve hardened. She would get there and complete this troubled pilgrimage, even if she had to walk the rest of the way. By the way, Troubled Pilgrimage is the title of the chapter. And let's get something a little bit more, what am I trying to think? This is not really what I want. No, that's not really what I want either. I want something a little, chill, but also like, here we go. This is what I want. Perfect. Okay, so Citra believes she is going to face Faraday's killer. She intends to take revenge on him, probably by killing him, or maybe even just like interrogating him, trying to get him arrested trying to take him back so she can clear her name. So she is totally intent on going to find this guy, Gerald Vandergans, and killing him for killing Scythe Faraday. How does one face a murderer? Not a socially sanctioned killer, but an actual murderer. An individual who, without the blessing of society or even its permission, permanently ends a human life. Citra knew that in the world at large, the Thunderhead prevented such things. Certainly, people get pushed in front of trains or under trucks or off rooftops in the heat of frustrated moments. But that which is broken is always repaired. Amends are made. An ordained Scythe, however, who lives outside of the Thunderhead's jurisdiction, has no such protection. To be revived is not automatic. For Scythe, it must be requested. But who is there to advocate for a Scythe felled by foul play? Which means that although Scythes may be the most powerful humans on Earth, they are also the most vulnerable. Today, Citra vowed to be an advocate for the dead. She would deliver justice for her fallen mentor. Clearly, the Thunderhead would not stand in her way. It had given her the murderer's name. So had Scythe Curie when she had sent her on this mission, the final phase of her training. Everything rested on the actions she would take today. Playa Pintada, the painted beach. Today, the coastline was strewn with large chunks of twisted, gnarled driftwood. In the dwindling sunset, they seemed like the arms and legs of a terrible creature slowly heaving themselves out of the sand. Citra crouched behind a driftwood dragon, hiding within its shadow. A storm was moving in from the north, building over the sea and rolling inexorably toward shore. Distant lighting could already be seen playing deep within its darkness, and thunder rolled in counterpoint to the crashing surf. She had only a handful of the weapons she had started with, a pistol, a switchblade, the hunting knife. The rest had been too hard to conceal, and so she had to cast them off before boarding the train in Buenos Aires. It was barely a day ago, yet it felt like a week. The home she watched was a single-story box of dwelling. Like many of the homes on the beach, most of it was hidden behind palms and blooming birds of paradise. There was a back patio that overlooked the beach on the other side of a lodge. Lights were on inside. A shadow periodically moved behind the curtains. Citra reviewed her options. Were she already a Scythe, she would glean him, following Scythe Curie's methods. A blade through the heart, quick and decisive. This was one instance where she didn't doubt her ability to do it, but she wasn't a Scythe. Any lethal attack would merely render him deadish, and an ambudrone would arrive within minutes to take him to be revived. What she needed to do was to incapacitate him. Take him down, but not out, and then extract a confession. Was he working for another Scythe or acting alone? Was he bribed like the witnesses? Was he motivated by a promise of immunity, or was a personal vendetta against Faraday? Then, once she knew the truth, she could bring the man and the confession to Scythe Pozuelo or anyone in the Amazonia Scythedom. That way, not even Xenocrates could squelch the truth. It would clear her of any wrongdoing, and the true culprit would receive whatever punishment awaits a Scythe killer. Perhaps Citra could stay here in Amazonia then, and never have to face the awful prospect of winter conclave. At the last traces of twilight, she heard a sliding glass door whoosh open, and she peered over the rough edge of the driftwood to see him come onto the patio to look out at the approaching storm. He was perfectly silhouetted against the light inside, like a paper target at a shooting range. He couldn't have made it easier for her. She pulled out her pistol. At first, she leveled it right at his heart, force of habit from her training. Then she lowered it to his knee and fired. Her aim was perfect. He wailed and went down, and Citra raced across the sand, leaping the hedge, and grabbed him by the shirt with both hands as he writhed. "You're going to pay for what you've done," she snarled. Then she saw the man's face. Familiar. Too familiar. Her first instinct was to think this was another layer of treachery. it wasn't until he spoke that she had to accept the truth. Citra? Scythe Faraday's face was a mask of pain and disbelief. Citra, oh God, what are you doing here? She let him go out of shock, and Scythe Faraday's head hit the concrete hard, knocking him out, and making the horror of the moment all the worse. She wanted to call for help, but who would help her after what she'd done? She lifted his head again, cradling it gently as blood flowed from his shattered knee, flowed between the patio stones, turning the sand in the cracks to red mortar, drying to brown. Oh no! I mean, good news? Kind of? Scythe Faraday's alive? So who's Gerald Vandergans? And what is Citra gonna do now that she sees that Scythe Faraday is alive? How is she gonna get her name cleared? Immortality cannot temper the folly or frailty of youth. Innocence is doomed to die a senseless death at our own hands, a casualty of the mistakes we can never undo. So we lay to rest the wide-eyed wonder we once thrived upon, replacing it with scars of which we never speak, too knotted for any amount of technology to repair. With each gleaning, I commit. With each life taken for the good of humanity, I mourn for the boy I once was, whose names I sometimes struggle to remember, and I long for a place beyond immortality where I can, in some small measure, resurrect the wonder and be that boy again. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Faraday. Okay, so we've gotten a lot of information this part. We've gotten not only Scythe Curie's past, but also Scythe Faraday's past. And we got Scythe Faraday back. Scythe Faraday didn't die. So what happened? Why is he pretending to be dead? So remember, Citra and Rowan believe that Scythe Faraday self-gleans himself because he wants to free them from their bond of having to kill each other after being chosen as one of the Scythes. So he did it to try and free them. They didn't get freed, so he did it for nothing. Turns out he didn't really kill himself. He faked his own death. So let's find out. Or I assume that's why he's still alive. Okay, chapter 33. Both the messenger and the message. Citra carried him inside. She set him on a sofa and made a tourniquet to staunch the blood. He groaned, beginning to rouse, and when he broke the tenuous surface of consciousness, his first thought was of her. "You should not be here," he said, his words weak and slurred. An effect of his pain nanites flooding his system. Still, he grimaced in bleary agony. "We have to get you to a hospital," she told him. "This is too much for your nanites to handle." "Nonsense. They've already taken the edge off the pain. As for healing, they'll do the job without intervention." "But I have no other option," he told her. "Going to a hospital will alert the Scythedom that I'm still alive." He shifted position, grimacing only slightly. "Between nature and nanites, my knee will heal. It will just take time, of which I have no shortage." She elevated his leg, bandaged it, then sat on the floor beside him. "Were you so resentful of my leaving that you had to exact your revenge in flesh?" he asked, only half joking. "Are you so offended that I managed a method of secretly retiring instead of actually gleaning myself?" "I thought you were someone else," she told him. "Someone named Gerald Vandergans. My birth name," he told her. "A name I surrendered when I became Honorable Scythe Michael Faraday. But none of this explains your presence here. I freed you, Citra, you and Rowan both. By faking my own gleaning, you were both freed from your apprenticeship. You should be back in your old life, forgetting that I plucked you from it. So, why are you here?" "You mean you don't know?" He pulled himself up slightly so he could see her more directly. "Don't know what?" And so she told him everything. How, instead of being freed, she and Rowan had ended up with Scythes, Curie, and Goddard. How Xenocrates had tried to pin Faraday's murder on her, and how Scythe Curie had helped her get to him. As she spoke, he put his hands to his eyes as if he might gouge them out. "To think I was complacent here, while all this was going on. How could you not know?" she asked, for in her mind he always seemed to know everything, even the things he could not possibly know. Scythe Faraday sighed. Marie, Scythe Curie, that is the only member of the Scythedom who knows I'm still alive. I am completely off-grid now. The only way to reach me would be in person. So she sent you. You are both the messenger and the message. The moment became uncomfortable. Thunder rumbled in from the sea, much closer now, the flashes of lightning brighter. Is it true you died 7 deaths for her? Citra asked. He nodded. And her for me. She told you that, did she? Well, it was a very long time ago. Outside, the rain finally began to fall, surging in fits and starts. I love the way it rains here, he told her. It reminds me that some forces of nature can never be entirely subdued. They are eternal, which is far better thing to be than immortal. And so they sat listening to the soothing randomness of the rain until Citra began to grow too weary to even think. So, what happens now? Very simple, actually. I heal and you rest. Anything beyond that is a conversation for a future date. Then he pointed. The bedroom's in there. I expect a full night's sleep from you, followed by a recitation of your poisons in the morning in order of toxicity. My poisons? In spite of his pain and drug-induced haze, Scythe Faraday smiled. Yes, your poisons. Are you my apprentice or not? Citra couldn't help but smile right back at him. Yes, Your Honor, I am. Scythe Faraday and Citra. I think Citra is Scythe Faraday's favorite. Personally, I think Citra is everybody's favorite, right? She's like the best one. They all want her to win. All the good guys. Poor Rowan. Poor kid. He's stuck, he's stuck with nobody liking him. Okay. It's too bad. Really is too bad. I'm gonna turn we're gonna maybe switch off. Should we switch off maybe? Okay. No, I think we stay here. I think this is actually good music for this. Okay. The longer we live, the quicker the days seem to pass. How troublesome that is when we live forever. A year seemed to pass in a matter of weeks. Decades fly with no milestones to mark them. We become settled in the inconsequential drudgery of our lives. Until suddenly we look at ourselves in the mirror and see a face we barely recognize, begging us to turn a corner and be young again. But are we truly young when we turn the corner? We hold the same memories, the same habits, the same unrealized dreams. Our bodies may be spry and limber, but toward what end? No end. Never an end. I do believe mortals strived more heartily toward their goals because they knew that time was of the essence. But us? We can put things off far more effectively than those doomed to die, because death has become the exception instead of the rule. The stagnation that I so fervently glean on a daily basis seems an epidemic that only grows. There are times I feel I am fighting a losing battle against an old-fashioned apocalypse of the living dead. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. That's interesting. That's an interesting take that Curie has on that, right? That this is like the fact that everybody's immortal just leads everybody to be zombies, like literal zombies, because they are just so bored with their lives and they have so much time. And it's like, why accomplish anything if you're just going to live forever? Interesting take. Very interesting. The second most painful thing you'll ever have to do. Chapter 34. Winter spread relentlessly closer, as Rowan kept a tally of the lives he temporarily ended. But as the days passed, he found he couldn't keep up. A dozen a day, week to week, month to month, they all blended together. For the 8 months he trained under Scythe Goddard, he had made over 2,000 kills. Mostly the same people over and over again. Did those people despise him, he wondered? Or did they truly see this as just a job? There were times when the training called for them to run or even fight back, but were inept at it. Most were inept at it, but some had clearly been trained in combat. There were even sessions where his targets had their own weapons. He had been cut and stabbed and shot, but never so severely that he had to be revived. He had grown into an exceptionally skilled killer. "You have excelled beyond my wildest expectations," Goddard told him. I suspected you had a spark in you, but I never dreamed it could be such an inferno." And yes, he had come to enjoy it, just as Scythe Goddard said he would. And just like Scythe Volta, he despised himself for it. Poor Rowan.
Aww.
"I'm looking forward to your ordainment," Volta told him one day during the afternoon studies together. "Maybe you and I can split off from Goddard, glean at our own speed in our own way." But Rowan knew Volta would never find the momentum to escape Goddard's gravity. "You're assuming that I'll be chosen over Citra," Rowan pointed out. "Citra's gone," Volta reminded him. "She's been off grid for months. If she shows her face at Conclave, the Bejeweling Committee won't look too kindly on her for being AWOL all this time. All you have to do is pass the final test, and without any question, you'll win." Which is what Rowan was afraid of. The news of Citra's disappearance had trickled down to Rowan unofficially. He didn't know the whole story. She had been accused of something by Xenocrates. There was an emergency meeting of the disciplinary committee, and Scythe Curie showed up on her behalf, clearing her of any wrongdoing. The accusation must have been orchestrated by Goddard because he was furious at the committee's decision to drop the charges, and by the fact that Citra had completely vanished. Not even Scythe Curie seemed to know where she was. The day after that, Goddard took his junior Scythes and Rowan on a gleaning rampage, fueled by his fury. He released his rage at a crowded harvest festival. And this time, Rowan couldn't save anyone because Goddard kept him by his side as his weapons caddy. Scythe Chomsky used his flamethrower to set a corn maze ablaze, smoking people out, to be picked off one by the other sides. Okay, we are in Rowan's territory now. I feel like we need sad stuff. Is this sad enough? Sounds like it might be sad enough. There we go. Yeah, this is sad enough for Rowan. This is sad enough. Okay. Scythe Volta was now in the doghouse, though, because he had lobbed a container of poison gas into the burning maze. Highly effective, but it stole kills from Goddard and the others. "I did it to be humane," Volta confided in Rowan. "Better than die by gas than by fire." Then he added, "or by getting blown away just as they thought they were escaping the maze." Perhaps Rowan was wrong about Volta. Maybe he would escape from Goddard, but he certainly wouldn't do it without Rowan. It was one more argument for Rowan to earn the ring. They had all reached their gleaning quota by the end of that awful evening, and Goddard still didn't seem to have satisfied his bloodlust. He raged against the system, if only to his own disciples, calling for a day when scythes would have no limits on gleaning. Citra returned to Scythe Curie at Falling Water many weeks before Winter Conclave, when the month of lights had just begun and gifts were being passed between friends and loved ones to celebrate ancient miracles that no one quite remembered. Unlike her frantic journey to Amazonia's northern shore, Citra flew home in comfort and with peace of mind. She didn't have to look over her shoulder every 5 minutes because no one was chasing her anymore. As Scythe Curie had promised, Citra had been cleared of any wrongdoing, and while Scythe Mandela sent a heartfelt note of apology for Scythe Curie to give to Citra, High Blade Xenocrates made no such gesture. "He will pretend like it never happened," Scythe Curie told her as the two of them drove home from the airport. "That's the closest the man will ever come to an apology." "But it did happen," Citra said. "I had to hurl myself from a building to escape from it." "And I had to blow up 2 perfectly good cars," Scythe Curie said wryly. "I won't forget what he did, and you shouldn't. You have every right to judge Xenocrates harshly, but not too harshly. I suspect there are more variables in play than we know." That's what Scythe Faraday said. Scythe Curie smiled at the mention of his name. "And how is our good old friend Gerald?" she asked with a wink. "Reports of his death have been greatly exaggerated," said Citra. "Mostly he gardens and takes long walks on the beach." The fact that he was still alive was a secret they both planned to keep. Even Scythe Mandela believed that Citra was staying with a relative of Scythe Curie in Amazonia, and he had no reason to suspect it wasn't true. Perhaps I'll join him on his beach in 100 years or so, said Scythe Curie. But for now, there's too much to do in the Scythedom. Too much crucial battles to fight. Isn't it cute? Can we just pause? Aww. Oops.
Aww.
Isn't it cute? I don't know what that is. Oh yeah, okay. Isn't it cute that Scythe Curie and Scythe Faraday, like she wants to like go join him for retirement one day in 100 years so. I'll go join him. Oh, so cute. Okay. But she's still fighting. She's like, no, I'm not giving up yet. Citra could see her gripping the steering wheel tighter as she thought of it. The future of everything we believe as Scythes is at stake, Citra. There's even talk of abolishing the quota, which is why you must win the ring. I know the Scythe you'll be, and it's exactly what we need. Citra looked away. Without daily gleaning, her training with Scythe Faraday over the past few months had been about honing her mind and body, but more importantly, contemplating the moral and ethical high ground that a traditional scythe must always take. There was nothing old guard about it. It was simply right. She knew such high ideals were absent from Rowan's training, but it didn't mean he didn't hold on to them in his heart, despite his bloodthirsty mentor. Rowan could be a good scythe as well, Citra offered. Scythe Curie sighed. He can't be trusted anymore. Look at what he did to you at Harvest Conclave. You can make all the excuses in the world for him, but the fact is he's an unknown quantity now. Training under Goddard is bound to twist him into ways that no one can predict. Even if that's true, said Citra, finally getting to the point they both knew she'd been dancing around. I don't know how I could glean him. It will be the second most painful thing you'll ever do. Title of the chapter. Admitted Scythe Curie. But you'll find a way to accomplish it, Citra. I have faith in you. If gleaning Rowan would be the second most painful thing she'd ever do, Citra wondered what the most painful thing would be. She was afraid to ask, because she really didn't want to know. Yeah, I wonder what the most painful thing is going to be. I'm sure that's like, it's going to stick with Citra in the back of her mind. So many of our archaic traditions and rules, and this is a new journal entry, by the way. So many of our archaic traditions and rules need to be challenged. The founders, as well-meaning as they were, still suffered from a mortal mentality, having been so close to the age of mortality. They could not foresee the needs of the Scythedom. I would first take on the concept of a quota. It's absurd that we are free to determine our method and criteria for gleaning, but not the number of gleanings we accomplish. We are hamstrung every minute of every day because we must always consider whether we are gleaning too much or too little. Better to allow us to glean at our own complete discretion. That way, scythes who glean too little will not be punished, because scythes who have a healthier gleaning appetite will make up for their shortcomings. In this way, we can help one another. And isn't helping our fellow scythes a good thing for us all? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Goddard. Chapter 35. Obliteration is our hallmark. Okay, this seems a little too peaceful. We're about to get things intense. With Rowan, he's in a troubled spot. Do we have troubled music? Troubled hero? Let's try this. Troubled hero music. Is this it? Okay. Yes, this is definitely it. Okay. On the last day of the year, just 3 days before Winter Conclave, Scythe Goddard led one more gleaning expedition. But we've already reached our quota for the year, Scythe Volta was quick to remind him. I will not be constrained by a technicality, Goddard shouted. Rowan thought Goddard might actually hit Volta, but then he took a moment to calm himself and said, by the time we begin our gleaning run, it will already be the year of the capybara in Pan-Asia. As far as I'm concerned, That gives us permission to count our kills as a part of the new year. Then we shall return in time for our New Year's Eve gala. Scythe Goddard decided it was a day for samurai swords, although Chomsky refused to part with his flamethrower. It's what I'm known for. Why mess with my image? Rowan had been on 4 gleaning expeditions with Goddard so far. He found he could escape to a place within himself where he was less of an accomplice, even less than an observer. He became the lettuce again. Non-sentient and secondary, easily ignored and forgotten. It was the only way to keep his sanity in the midst of Goddard's blood sport. Sometimes he was so forgotten in the midst of the melee that he could help people escape. Other times he had to be at Goddard's side, loading or switching out his weapons. He didn't know what his role would be this time. If Goddard was just using his samurai blade, he didn't need Rowan to be his weapons caddy. Still, he told Rowan to bring a spare sword. Okay, so Citra is right. Right? She says to Scythe Curie, like, you know, Rowan could be good, right? He could still hang on to the ideals that Scythe Faraday has taught us over time, that he has instilled in us in his training. He could still be good. And Scythe Faraday has a right to be suspicious because of Goddard. But it does look like Rowan is hanging on to his ideals, right? When he does go to gleanings with the crew, he's trying to help people escape. He doesn't want to be there, even though he supposedly said that he's starting to enjoy killing. But I think, you know, when we've read about those instances in the past, Rowan has been just felt like he's accomplished something, right? Like it's like that heat of the moment kind of feeling where you've got a lot of adrenaline and endorphins going off because you're using your body. And it's kind of tricking him into thinking that he likes it, I think. But I think he still believes that what Goddard is doing is wrong and is trying to stop him, or at least disassociate. And it sounds like Volta is that same way. And if Rowan can be strong enough, he could take Volta with him and they could go and leave Goddard and not have to be subjected to so much pain. And, you know, something that's making them both very uncomfortable and not making them feel good. Okay, here we go. Okay, I forgot where I was. Okay, yeah, so Goddard did tell him to bring us another sword, though. I wonder what that's going to mean, right? Rowan didn't say it, but I feel like he's got to know that that means that they're going to want him to glean, too, right? They're going to want him to be a part of it. Preparations for the party were already in full swing as they got ready to leave for the gleaning run that morning. The catering truck had arrived and tables were being set. I'm just going to pull this back a little bit, pull the drama back a little bit. Tables were being set up all over the grounds. The New Year's Eve gala was one of Goddard's few pre-planned parties, and the guest list was stellar. The helicopter landed on the front lawn, blowing away a tent that was being erected for the party as if it were nothing more than a napkin tumbled by the wind. Today, we shall provide a much-needed public service, Goddard told them, with far too much glee. Today, we dispense with some rabble. But he didn't explain what he meant. Even so, as the helicopter took off, Rowan had a sinking feeling deep in the pit of his stomach that had nothing to do with their ascent. They landed in a public park in the center of a vacant soccer field lightly dusted with snow. There was a playground at the edge of the park where some toddlers, unfazed by the weather, climbed and swung and dug in the sand, bundled up against the cold. The instant their parents saw Scythe stepping out of the helicopter, they gathered their children and hurried away, ignoring their children's wails of protest. Our destination is several blocks away, Scythe Goddard told them. I didn't want to set down too close and ruin the... Okay, hang on. We're just pausing for a moment to make sure that we're reconnected. It says I'm reconnected, but okay, we are. Okay, that was strange. Okay, but we're back. Okay, no worries. Okay, so just back it up a little bit. Today is Rowan's inauguration, he said. You will perform your first gleaning today. Rowan recoiled. What? Me? I can't. I'm just an apprentice. Proxy, my boy, just as I allowed you to grant immunity with my ring, so you will glean someone today, and it will be tallied as mine. Consider it a gift. You don't have to thank me. But that's not allowed. Goddard was unperturbed. Then let someone complain. Oh, what's that I hear? Silence. Don't worry, Volta told Rowan. It's what you've trained for. You'll do fine. Which is what Rowan was worried about. He didn't want to do fine. He wanted to be miserable at it. He wanted to be a failure because only by failing would he know that he held on to a shred of his humanity. His brain felt about it, ready to burst out through his nose and ears. Ew. He hoped it would, because then he'd glean nobody today. If I must do this, I will be merciful like Scythe Faraday, he told himself. I will not enjoy it. I will not enjoy it. They came around a corner and Rowan saw their destination, some sort of compound made to look like an old adobe mission, completely out of place in the cold of mid-America. The iron symbol atop the tallest steeple was a two-pronged fork. This was a tone cult cluster. Cloister is going to be a vocabulary word. So this is kind of sad because Goddard is going to go glean a Tonist cult who are not people that are like, they're not the type of people that are like hurting society, right? But people do look down on them, right? The majority of the society looks down on the Tonists because they are supposedly kind of silly because of their beliefs, which is religious persecution at its finest, kind of a socially acceptable religious persecution. But either way, they are still being targeted, and Goddard could get into trouble for this because it is showing, this is kind of technically showing bias. He may get away with it because they're Tonists and no one really seems to care about them, but it's still bias. Okay. Tonist cult, cloister. Cloister is like another word for a place where like religious people gather. Nearly 100 Tonists reside behind those walls. Goddard announced, "Our goal is to glean them all." Scythe Rand grinned. Scythe Chomsky checked the settings on his weapon. Only Scythe Volta seemed to have reservations. All of them? Goddard shrugged as if it were nothing, as if all those lives meant nothing. Obliteration is all I just messed it up. I hate it. Obliteration is our hallmark, is the title of the chapter. He said, "We don't always succeed, but we try. This breaks the second commandment. It clearly shows bias." "Come now, Alessandro," Goddard said in his most patronizing tone. "Biased against whom? Tonists are not a registered cultural group." "Couldn't they be considered a religion?" Rowan offered. "They can, and they are." "You gotta be kidding," laughed Scythe Rand. "They're a joke." "Precisely," agreed Goddard. "They've made a mockery of mortal age faith. Religion is a cherished part of history, and they've turned it into a travesty." "Glean them all," said Chomsky, powering up his weapon. Goddard and Rand drew their swords. Volta glanced at Rowan and said quietly, "The best thing about these gleanings is that it's over quick." Then he drew his sword as well and followed the others through a gated archway that the Tonists always left open for lost souls seeking tonal solace. They had no idea what was coming. Word spread quickly on the street that a small elegy of scythes had entered the Tonist cloister. As human nature would have it, rumor quickly raised the number to a dozen scythes or more. And as human nature would also have it, crowds that were slightly more excited than frightened gathered across the street, wondering if they could get a glimpse at the scythes, and perhaps even the carnage that they left behind. But all they saw for now was a single young man, an apprentice standing at the open gate, his back to the crowd. Rowan was ordered to remain at the gate, sword drawn, to prevent anyone from trying to escape. His plan, of course, was to allow anyone to escape. But when the panicked Tonus saw him, his sword, and his apprentice armband, they ran back into the compound, where they became prey for the Scythes. He stood there for 5 minutes, then finally he left his spot at the gate, losing himself in the maze-like compound. Only then did people begin to slip out to safety. The sounds of anguish were almost impossible to endure. Knowing he'd be expected to glean someone before this was through made it impossible for him to disappear into himself this time. The place was a labyrinth of courtyards and walkways and illogical structures. He had no idea where he was. A building was burning to his left, and one walkway was littered with the dead, marking the passage of one of the Scythes. A woman huddled, partially hidden by a winter bare scrub, cradling a baby, trying desperately to keep it quiet. She panicked when she saw Rowan and screamed, holding her baby closer. "I'm not going to hurt you," he told her. "No one's guarding the main gate. If you hurry, you'll make it now. Go." She didn't waste any time. She took off. Rowan could only hope she didn't run into a Scythe on the way. Then he came around a corner and saw another figure huddled against a column, chest heaving in sobs. But it wasn't one of the Tonists. It was Scythe Volta. His sword lay on the ground. His yellow robe was splattered with blood, and blood covered his hands, shiny and slick. When he saw Rowan, he turned away, his sobs growing heavier. Rowan knelt down to him. He clutched something in his hand, not a weapon, but something else. "It's over," Volta said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's over now." Clearly, however, from the sounds coming from elsewhere in the compound, it was not over at all. "What happened, Alessandro?" Rowan asked. Volta looked at him then, the anguish in his eyes like that of a man already damned. I thought it was an office, or maybe a storeroom. I'd go in, there'd be a couple of people there. I'd glean them as painlessly as I could and move on. That's what I thought. But it wasn't an office. Or a storeroom. It was a classroom. He broke down again in sobs as he spoke. There had to be at least a dozen little kids in there, cowering. They were cowering from me, Rowan. But there was this one boy. He stepped forward. His teacher tried to stop him, but he stepped forward. He wasn't afraid, and he held up one of their stupid tuning forks. He held it up like it would ward me off. "You won't hurt us," he said. Then he struck it against a desk to make it ring and held it up to me. "By the power of the tone, you won't hurt us," he said. And he believed it, Rowan. He believed it in its power. He believed it would protect him. "What did you do?" Volta closed his eyes, and his words came out in a horrible squeal. I gleaned them all." And then he opened his bloody hand, revealing that he held the boy's little tuning fork. It tumbled to the ground with a tiny atonal clank. "What are we, Rowan? What the hell are we? It can't be what we're supposed to be." "It's not. It never was. Goddard isn't a Scythe. He may have the ring, he may have a license to glean, but he's not a Scythe. He's a killer, and he has to be stopped. We can find a way to stop him, both of us." Volta shook his head and looked at the blood pooling in his palms. "It's over," he said again, then took a deep, shuddering breath and became very, very calm. "It's over, and I'm glad." That's when Rowan realized that the blood on Volta's hands was not from his victims. It was from Volta's own wrists. The gashes were jagged and long, and they were made with very clear intent. "Alessandro, no, you don't have to do this. We have to call an ambudrone. It's not too late." But they both knew it was. Self-gleaning is every Scythe's last prerogative. Can't rob that from me, Rowan. Don't even try. His blood was everywhere now, staining the snow of the courtyard. Rowan wailed. Never had he felt so helpless. "I'm sorry, Alessandro. I'm so sorry. My real name is Sean Dobson. Will you call me that, Rowan? Will you call me by my real name?" Rowan could barely speak through his own tears. It's been an honor to know you, Sean Dobson." He leaned on Rowan, barely able to hold up his head, his voice getting weaker. "Promise me you'll be a better Scythe than I was." "I promise, Sean." And then maybe, Whatever he was going to say, it leaked away with the last of his life. His head came to rest on Rowan's shoulder, while all around them, distant cries of agony filled the icy air.
Aww.
Sad. So that's really, that's huge. Volta commits an act that he despises himself for so much that he self-gleans in order to escape Goddard. And it seems like, here's the thing. Volta went into this not thinking he was going to do this, right? Like he was saying to Rowan, I'm looking forward to you getting the ring. I'm looking forward to us being, working together. Maybe we can go away. Like maybe we can leave Goddard, right? Maybe we can have a secret relationship like Scythe Faraday and Scythe Curie. Ooh, that's some tea. Rowan and Scythe Volta. I ship it. I do. I ship it. But no, it can't happen because Scythe Volta just self-gleaned himself. And also did a horrible thing by gleaning all of the Tonus children. Really tough. So, so Rowan, what's Rowan gonna do, right? Is he gonna just take over for Volta? Is he going to, try to, I don't know, take Goddard down on his own? We don't know. We really don't know. Okay, so here we go. On to the next. Each day, I pray as my ancestors did. They once prayed to gods that were fallible and fickle, then to one God who stood in harsh and terrifying judgment, then to a loving, forgiving God, and then finally to a power with no name. But to whom can the immortal pray? I have no answer to that, but I still cast my voice out into the void, hoping to reach something beyond distance and deeper than the depths of my own soul. I ask for guidance and for courage, and I beg. Oh, how I beg that I never become so desensitized to the death that I must deliver that it feels normal, commonplace. My greatest wish for humanity is not for peace or comfort or joy. It is that we all still die a little inside every time we witness the death of another. For only the pain of empathy will keep us human. There's no version of God that can help us if we ever lose that. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Faraday. Chapter 36. The 13th Kill. Goddard was in the chapel sanctuary, finishing the last of his terrible business. Outside, the wails began to fade as Rand and Chomsky finished what they had begun. A building was burning across the courtyard. Smoke and cold air poured in through the broken stained glass windows of the chapel. Goddard stood at the front by an altar that featured a shining two-pronged fork and a stone bowl of dirty water. There was only one Tonus left alive in the chapel. He was a balding man, wearing a frock that was slightly different from the dead around him. Goddard held him with one hand and wielded his sword in the other. Then Goddard turned to see Rowan and smiled. "Ah, Rowan, just in time," he said cheerfully. "I saved the curate for you." The Tonus curate showed defiance rather than fear. "What you've done here today will only help our cause," he said. "Martyrs testify far more effectively than the living." "Martyrs to what?" Goddard sneered and tapped his blade against the huge tuning fork. "To this thing? I'd laugh if I wasn't so disgusted." Rowan strode closer, ignoring the carnage around him, focusing in on Goddard. "Let him go," Rowan said. "Why? Do you prefer a moving target?" "I prefer no target." Finally, Goddard understood. He grinned, as if Rowan had just said something charming and quaint. "Does our young man express a wee bit of disapproval?" "Volta's dead," Rowan told him. Goddard's gleeful expression faded, but only a bit. "He was attacked by the Tonists? They'll pay dearly for it." "It wasn't them." Rowan didn't even try to hide the animosity in his voice. "He gleaned himself." This gave Goddard pause. The curate struggled in his grip, and Goddard slammed him against the stone basin hard enough to knock him out, and then let the man fall to the ground. "Volta was the weakest of us," Goddard said. "I am not entirely surprised. Once you're ordained, I will happily have you take his place." I won't do that. Goddard took a moment to gauge Rowan, to read him. It felt like a violation. Goddard was in his head, even deeper in his soul, and Rowan didn't know how to cast him out. I know you and Alessandro were close, but he was nothing like you, Rowan, believe me. He never had the hunger, but you do. I've seen it in your eyes. I've seen how you are when you train, living in the moment, every kill perfect. Rowan found he couldn't look away from Goddard, who had put down his sword and now held his hands out as if he were inviting embrace of a savior. The diamonds in his robe twinkled in the faraway firelight, so bedazzling. We could have been called reapers, Goddard said, but our founders saw it fit to call us scythes, because we are the weapons in mankind's immortal hand. You are a fine weapon, Rowan, sharp and precise, and when you strike, you are glorious to behold. Stop it! It's not true! You know it is. You were born for this, Rowan. Don't throw it away. The curate began to groan. Beginning to regain consciousness, Goddard hauled him to his feet. Glean him, Rowan. Don't fight it. Glean him now and enjoy it. Rowan tightened the grip on his blade as he looked into the curate's bleary, half-conscious eyes. Even as he tried to stand his ground, Rowan couldn't deny the power of the undertow. You're a monster, he shouted. The worst kind, because you don't just kill, you turn others into killers like yourself. You just lack perspective. The predator is always a monster to the prey. To the gazelle, the lion is a demon. To the curate, to a mouse, the eagle is evil incarnate. He took a step closer, the curate still held tightly in his grip. Will you be the eagle or the mouse, Rowan? Will you soar or will you scurry away? Why are there lyrics in this song? Skip. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I really don't like lyrics when I'm trying to read. Okay, here we go. Stop it. You know it's not true. You know it is. You know you were born for this, Rowan. Don't throw it away. Yes. And enjoy it. Okay, wait. I've backed up way too far. Okay. Will you be the eagle or the mouse, Rowan? Will you soar or will you scurry away? For those are the only two choices today. Rowan's head was swimming. The smell of blood and the smoke pouring in through the shattered windows made him dizzy and muddled his thoughts. The curate looked no different than the strangers he practiced on every day. And for a moment he felt himself out on the lawn in the middle of a killcraft exercise. Rowan unsheathed his sword and stalked forward, feeling the hunger, living in the moment, just as Goddard had said, and allowing himself to feel that hunger was freeing in a way Rowan couldn't describe. So many months he had trained for this, and now he finally understood why Goddard always let the last one go before Rowan could strike, stopping him one blow short of completion. It was to prepare him for today. Today, he would finally have that completion, and every day henceforth when he went out to glean, he would not stay his hand or his blade or his bullet until there was no one left to glean. Before he could think it through, before his mind could tell him to stop, he launched himself toward the curate and thrust his blade forward with all of his force, finally achieving that exquisite completion. The man gasped and stumbled aside. The blade having missed him completely. Instead, Rowan's blade hit its true mark and ran Scythe Goddard through, all the way to the hilt. Rowan was close to Goddard now, inches from his face, looking into his wide, shocked eyes. I am what you made me, he told Goddard, and you're right. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that more than anything I've ever done in my life. Then, with his free hand, Rowan reached down and yanked the ring off Goddard's finger. You don't deserve to wear this. You never did. Goddard opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to deliver an eloquent death soliloquy. But Goddard didn't want to hear anything from him anymore, so he stepped back, withdrew his sword from Goddard's gut, and swung it in a broad, sweeping arc that took off Goddard's head in a single blow. Gross. It tumbled and landed in the base of dirty water as if it as if that were what the basin was there for. The rest of Goddard's body fell limply to the ground, and in the silence of the moment, Rowan heard from behind him. "What the hell did you do?" Rowan turned and saw Chomsky standing at the entrance of the chapel, with Rand beside him. "You are so gleaned when he's revived." Rowan let his training take over. "I am the weapon," he told himself, and in that moment he was a lethal one. Chomsky and Rand defended themselves against him, and although they were good, they were nothing compared to a weapon so sharp and precise as he. Rowan's blade cut Rand deep, but she kicked the sword out of his hand with a well-placed Bakator kick. Rowan responded with an even more effective kick that broke her spine. "Okay, Rowan, calm down." Chomsky set Rowan's arm ablaze with a flamethrower, but Rowan rolled on the ground, putting it out, then grabbed the toning mallet from beside the altar and brought it down on Chomsky like a hammer of Thor, striking again and again and again, as if he were toning the hour, until the curate grabbed his hand to stop him and said, "That's enough, son. He's dead." Rowan dropped the mallet. Only now did he allow himself to let down his guard. "Come with me, son," the man said. "There's a place for you with us. We can hide you from the Scythedom." Rowan looked at the man's outstretched hand, but even now Goddard's words came back to him. The eagle or the mouse? No, Rowan would not scurry away and hide. There was still more that had to be done. "Leave here," he told the man. "Find the survivors, if there are any, and get out. But do it quickly." The man looked at him for a moment more, then turned and left the chapel. Once he was gone, Rowan picked up the flamethrower and got down to business. Oh, snap. Oh, snap. Rowan just went full beast mode on the Scythes. That is crazy. That is intense. Okay, so now Rowan is, what are we going to call him? We're going to call him a rogue. He's, just branching out on his own. So let's get into this. Rowan's taking the flamethrower, so he's probably going to torch some stuff, right? He doesn't want the Scythes to be brought back to life. He doesn't want them to be revived. So he's going to try and maybe hide the evidence with by burning it and telling the Tonus to get out, so that way he can kind of just escape. Maybe not get into trouble for it. Who knows? We'll see. Of course I misclicked. I did not want to hit that. Thank you so much, though, for bringing that open for me. Okay, I'm just feeling like the music, I need to make it a little bit more backgroundy. Maybe there is where it needs to be. Perfect. That's exactly where it needs to be. Okay. Out on the street, fire trucks had already pulled up and peace officers were holding back crowds. The entire cloister was now on fire, and although firefighters raced toward the blaze, they were intercepted by a young man stepping out of the main gate. "This is a Scythe action. You will not intervene," he said. The fire captain, who now approached him, had heard of Scythe-related fires, but never had such a thing happen on his watch. There was something about this that didn't seem right. Yes, the boy appeared to be wearing a Scythe's robe, a royal blue one studded with diamonds, but the robe clearly didn't fit him. With flames consuming the compound at an alarming rate, the captain made a judgment call. This kid, whoever he was no Scythe, and was not about to hinder their efforts. "Out of the way," he told the kid dismissively. "Get back with the others and let us do our job." Then the kid moved with lightning speed. The captain felt his legs kicked out from under him. He landed on his back, and suddenly the kid was on top of him, a knee painfully pressed into the captain's chest, and a hand around his throat, squeezing so tightly it almost closed off his windpipe. Suddenly, the boy didn't seem a boy at all. He seemed a whole lot bigger and a whole lot older. "I said this is a Scythe action and you will not intervene, or I will glean you right here, right now." The fire captain now knew he had made a grievous mistake. No one but a Scythe could be so commanding and take such absolute control of a situation. Yes, Your Honor, the captain rasped. I'm sorry, Your Honor. The Scythe stood, letting the captain get up. He told his squad to fall back, and the squad, having seen the Scythe take their captain down so effectively, didn't question it. You can protect other buildings that are threatened, the young Scythe said, but you will let this entire compound burn to the ground. I understand, Your Honor. Then the Scythe held up his ring, and the captain kissed it with such force he cracked a tooth. Yikes. Rowan felt his skin crawling beneath Scythe Goddard's blood-soaked robe, but as unpleasant as it was, he needed to play the part. He was far more convincing than he thought he'd be. He frightened himself. The firefighters now directed all their attention to adjacent buildings, hosing down nearby roofs with fire retardant. Rowan found himself standing alone between the burning Tonus cloister and the crowd, still held back by peace officers. He stayed until the steeple caved in and the giant fork at its apex plunged into the flames, resounding with a mournful clang as it hit the ground. I have become the monster of monsters, he thought, as he watched it all burn. The butcher of lions, the executioner of eagles. Then, trying not to trip over the robe, Rowan strode away from the all-consuming inferno that would leave nothing behind of Scythe Goddard and his disciples, but bones too charred to ever be revived. And that's the end of part 4, you guys. That's the end of part 4. Rowan goes nuts and kills Scythe Goddard and all his friends and takes his robe and the ring and is going off on his own. Literally, like he tells those firefighters, like, burn it, let it burn. Don't try to take it out. And he fully plays the role, right? Like he is so ready and prepared to be like, nope, I'm a Scythe. You can't question me, which is, pretty awesome for Rowan, pretty powerful. Totally not what I saw coming when I originally read this book. I did not see Rowan going after Goddard. I didn't see like him, just totally killing him. I love what Rowan does Rowan thinks to himself at the end of this chapter, because it is really interesting, and it is going to be continuously interesting to see what Rowan does. Does this mean the conclave is off? Does this mean his fight with Citra is off? Does that mean he's still going to be, probably means he's going to be gleaned if he is even brought to the conclave, because he's gleaned the sides. But just going back real quick to what Rowan says to himself, I have become the monster of monsters, the butcher of lions, the executioner of eagles, right? So earlier in this same chapter, Goddard is comparing Rowan to, asking him, what are you going to be, right? Because a predator is evil to the prey. Prey like a mouse believes that the eagle is evil incarnate. So just because other people see you as a monster doesn't mean that you are one. It's your job. You're a predator, right? But Rowan kind of twists that at the end of this chapter, and he says he is the monster of monsters, almost like he's the predator of the other predators, right? So what does that mean? Is he going to go after sides now? Is he going to go after the other sides like Scythe Goddard? This is where it gets so interesting, right? Because Rowan is going in a completely different path than Citra, but equally as groundbreaking in this world, I'd say. So part 5 is the final part of this book. There's only a little bit left, and we're going to come back to this tomorrow. It's so intense. It's so intense, right? This book is so good. It's so intense. We're getting to the end, and now we're really getting to the climax of the book to see what happens between Rowan and Citra. What is Citra gonna think when she finds out about what Rowan's been doing, what Rowan's been up to? What are her feelings about it? Maybe she agrees with him. Maybe she wants to partner up with him. Yeah. So, because she's been completely cleared of Faraday's death, right? Scythe Curie came forward and said that journal entry is not about Citra, it's about me. And it seems like she's been forgiven. Basically, she can come back and be a Scythe's apprentice and continue her apprenticeship. But they're still supposed to meet at Winter Conclave. Rowan and Citra are supposed to meet. They're supposed to face off. They're supposed to decide who's going to be the next Scythe, who's going to get the ring. But now Rowan has a ring. He has Scythe Goddard's ring, right? Like, and he has his robe. Probably not going to keep Scythe Goddard's robe just because it's pretty remarkable, right? It's like a staple of Scythe Goddard. So he might not keep the robe, or he might, right? I think in the book trailer, Rowan was wearing a blue robe, like a dark blue robe. It was just a plain dark blue robe, but it was a robe. So maybe he takes on Scythe Goddard's robe. Maybe he tries to pretend to be him. I don't know. I don't know what's going to go on here. I that's a lie. I totally know. I totally know what's going to go on here. But I am really interested to see what happens at the end of this book and to talk about it at the end, because I think we're going to have a lot of fun with different activities to do with it, because it's such a great book. There's so much to discuss here. There's so much going on. It's really good. It's really good. Is Rowan going to find out about Scythe Faraday? Is he going to think that he's still alive, or is he going to know that he's still alive? That I don't know. That I do not know. So, yeah. Okay, so that's going to be it for today, everybody. We're finished up with Scythe Part 4. We're going to move on to the last part of Scythe tomorrow. I'm going to try to get on earlier than I did today, so we've got more time or whatever. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you are enjoying this book. I hope you go out and buy a copy for yourself, because you should. And yeah, so, okay, we're going to finish up. I'm going to end. Have a fabulous, fabulous day, week, month, year. And yeah, and I will see you all tomorrow for Part 5 of Scythe. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you later. See you in class. Bye.